A pregnant woman walks into a busy café hoping for a quiet lunch. But one waitress has other plans: humiliation, ridicule, and cruelty. What she doesn't know is that the woman she's targeting is married to one of the most feared men in the city. This isn't just a story about spilled water. It's about courage, dignity, and a lesson some people learn far too late. Watch until the end to see how a single act of arrogance backfires in ways no one could predict. Like, share, and comment if you believe no one should ever be humiliated for their skin color or who they are. The restaurant was crowded, buzzing with chatter, but Selina felt the weight of every stare. She was 7 months pregnant, her hands gently resting on her growing belly, trying to ignore the sharp glances and whispers around her. All she wanted was a quiet lunch, a moment of peace before the chaos of the day. Then came Candice, the waitress with the perfect smile that never reached her eyes, the one whose tone dripped with barely hidden disdain. Candice didn't just serve tables, she judged, she humiliated, she thrived on making others feel small. And today, Selina was her target. It started small. A snide remark about Selina's order, a roll of her eyes when Selina asked a simple question. But Selina, weary from the pregnancy and the world's constant judgment, tried to stay calm. She smiled politely, nodded, and waited. That's when it happened. A tray of water, perfectly balanced in Candice's hands, then suddenly tipped, splashing cold liquid all over Selina. Shock froze Selina in place. Gasps rippled through the restaurant. Candice laughed, loud and sharp, a sound that cut through the murmurs like a knife. Selina's heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the humiliation. People stared. Phones whipped out. Some whispered, some shook their heads, some laughed. And Candice? She walked away, smirking, leaving Selina soaked, angry, and exposed. But here's the thing. Candice had no idea who she had just humiliated. No clue at all. Because Selina wasn't just anyone. She wasn't just a pregnant woman trying to enjoy a simple meal. She was married to Jason, a man whose reputation alone could send shivers down the spine of anyone foolish enough to cross him. A man whose wrath was legendary, even in circles where fear was currency, and now the question hanging in the air. What happens when the wrong person humiliates the right woman? When arrogance meets a force it could never hope to control? Selina's calm, polite facade hid a storm, one that had been building for years. And Candice, she had just unwittingly triggered it. The tension in the restaurant was palpable. Nobody knew what was coming next, and neither did Candice. How far would Selina go to protect herself, her baby, and her dignity? And when Jason finds out, will Candice wish she had never set foot in that restaurant? Stay tuned, because what happens next is a story of revenge, respect, and a lesson some people only learn too late. Selina's mornings were usually peaceful. She would wake up before the sun, the soft hum of the city outside her apartment, a comforting backdrop. Her apartment wasn't extravagant, but it was warm, filled with sunlight that spilled across her wooden floors and highlighted the framed photos of her and Jason smiling together. Jason, her husband, was a quiet force in her life. Successful, focused, but always protective. Even with his tough exterior, he had a gentle side that Selina relied on, especially now, months into her pregnancy. Every day, Selina followed a simple routine: a walk to the nearby bakery for fresh bread, a quick stop at the corner market, and then home to prepare meals while Jason managed his business calls. People often noticed her calm demeanor, the way she greeted everyone with a soft smile, but few knew the quiet strength that ran through her. She was proud of who she was, and she carried herself with a dignity that came from knowing her worth. But even in this routine life, Selina could feel the subtle walls that society had built around her. There were moments she sensed judgment, thinly veiled in casual glances or half smiles. In the market, a cashier would ring up her items slower than others. At the bakery, someone would make a comment about her taking up too much space on the bench. These were small, almost invisible injustices, things Selina brushed off with a polite nod. But that left a lingering sting. Jason often warned her to stay cautious in public, reminding her that appearances could make people underestimate her, or worse, give them the courage to act cruelly. But Selina was strong, and she didn't let these moments define her. She believed that the world could see past skin color, that kindness and strength would eventually earn respect. On this particular morning, Selina dressed carefully for a lunch outing. She was going to meet a friend at a downtown café, a small indulgence before her day became consumed by errands and Jason's constant work calls. Her outfit was comfortable, her hair neatly done, and a small smile played across her lips. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed safe. But as Selina left her apartment, the air of routine carried a quiet tension beneath it. She didn't know that her ordinary day would soon become a trial she could never have anticipated. That even in the safest spaces, prejudice could strike without warning, and that one simple lunch could turn into a confrontation that would challenge her dignity, her patience, and the very assumptions people made about her and her place in the world. Even as she walked through the busy streets, the first signs of a storm, small, subtle, yet dangerous, were already forming. Selina couldn't see it yet, but Candice, the waitress whose arrogance and prejudice would soon erupt, was about to step into her life, and nothing would ever be the same. The cafe was buzzing with midday chatter, clinking cutlery, and the occasional laughter of friends. Selina walked in carefully, her hand resting lightly on her belly. She scanned the room and spotted an empty table near the window. It wasn't perfect, but it was private enough for a quiet lunch. She smiled at the barista as she ordered a coffee, the kind of polite smile she had perfected over the years, the one that kept conflict at bay. Then Candice appeared. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor, a predatory rhythm that immediately made Selina's stomach tense. Candice carried herself like she owned the space, scanning the room with judgmental eyes. When she reached Selina's table, she tilted her head slightly, lips curling into a smirk. "Is this seat taken?" Candice asked, though her tone suggested she already assumed the answer should be no. Selina shook her head, trying to ignore the undercurrent of hostility. But Candice's gaze lingered, assessing, measuring, and finding fault in every detail. Selina's posture, her appearance, even the way she held her coffee cup. The first hint of humiliation came subtly. Candice dropped a napkin near Selina's table, intentionally so that it brushed against her arm. "Oops," she said, her voice too loud, too sharp. "Watch where you're putting things, please." There was laughter from a nearby table, polite, nervous, complicit. Selina's cheeks burned, but she stayed calm, taking a sip of her coffee and focusing on the quiet warmth spreading through her chest from the beverage. Then came the order mix-up. Candice had written down the wrong meal, then argued that Selina had misread the menu. When Selina politely corrected her, Candice rolled her eyes, loud enough for other customers to notice. "Are you serious?" she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Do you even know how menus work?" Selina's hand tightened around her cup. Her heart raced, not just from anger, but from the sudden, suffocating awareness that she was being targeted, humiliated, reduced to someone else's entertainment. She wanted to leave. She wanted to walk out and ignore the world, but something inside her refused. She wouldn't let Candice win by showing fear. And then it escalated. Candice returned with a tray of water, placing it near Selina's table with exaggerated care. But as she walked away, her elbow caught the tray. Water splashed across Selina's dress, soaking her carefully chosen outfit. Gasps filled the cafe. Selina froze, shock and humiliation washing over her. Candice laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that rang like glass breaking. "Seriously?" Candice said, shaking her head. "You really can't sit still, can you?" Her words were meant to sting, to degrade. Some patrons chuckled nervously, unsure how to respond. Others stared, curious and judgmental. Selina's mind raced. This wasn't just a mistake, it was deliberate. A test. A way to assert dominance, to make her feel powerless. And as the water soaked into her dress, Selina realized something chilling. This kind of prejudice wasn't random. It wasn't just Candice. It was everywhere. Small, calculated, systemic. It was how the world reminded her of her place, or tried to. She tried to stand, but her legs wobbled slightly from the pregnancy. Panic flared in her chest. Candice leaned closer, her face inches from Selina's, whispering mockingly, "Need some help there?" Selina's calm exterior cracked. She felt every eye on her, the curious, the sympathetic, the indifferent. The café, once a sanctuary, now felt like a courtroom where she was being judged and sentenced. And yet, through the fear and humiliation, a spark ignited. Selina's anger was quiet but powerful. She refused to be defined by this moment. She refused to be silenced. She wouldn't show weakness. But the question lingered, sharp and urgent. What would she do next? And how far could Candice push before Selina and the man she loved responded? Outside the window, the city continued its indifferent rhythm. Inside, tension crackled like electricity. Every second stretched longer than the last. And when Jason finally entered the cafe, unaware of what had just happened, the atmosphere shifted, an unspoken warning that the wrong person had just crossed the wrong woman. Selina straightened, a quiet storm in her eyes. Candice smirked, unaware of the force she had just provoked. The cafe was still, everyone waiting, knowing something had changed, but no one knew what was coming next. And just like that, the stage was set. Humiliation had been served, anger was simmering, and Selina, pushed to the edge, was about to teach a lesson no one, including Candice, would ever forget. The cafe had gone silent. Candice's laughter still hung in the air, sharp and cruel, but it was no longer the dominant sound. Every patron seemed to hold their breath, sensing the tension crackling around Selina. Her dress clung to her body cold and wet, but Selina didn't flinch. Not anymore. This wasn't just about water. This was about respect, about dignity, about the world refusing to tell her she was less than anyone else. She stood, slowly at first, letting the eyes of the room focus entirely on her. Candice's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, but it was too late to recover. Selina's gaze locked on hers, and it was no longer the calm, gentle expression people often mistook for submission. There was fire there now, controlled, deliberate, unshakable. "Do you think this is funny?" Selina's voice was low, steady, and somehow louder than any shouting. The room leaned in, waiting. Candice blinked, startled at the intensity she had provoked. I was just... Candice stammered, but Selina cut her off. "No. You were humiliating me. Deliberately. And for what? Because of the color of my skin? Because I'm pregnant? Because you think you can assert power over someone you see as weaker?" Every word was precise, each syllable a hammer striking through the false armor of Candice's confidence. Some of the cafe patrons shifted uncomfortably. A few whispered, but Selina ignored them. She was no longer performing for anyone else. She was reclaiming herself. And then Jason walked in. He didn't rush. He didn't storm. He didn't yell. He simply entered, his presence immediately changing the energy in the room. Candice's eyes widened as she recognized him, not just as a man with power, but as a man whose reputation alone could make others tremble. Jason was known for being unflinchingly decisive, calm under fire, and utterly protective of the people he loved. The kind of man you didn't want to provoke, especially when the provocation involved his family. Selina's hand found his instinctively. She didn't need him to act. He wasn't there to save her. But knowing he was present gave her a new kind of strength. Candice, on the other hand, could feel it. Her arrogance, once unchecked, now faltered as she realized her actions had consequences far beyond a spilled tray of water. Jason approached slowly, his eyes never leaving Candice. "I heard what happened here," he said, his voice calm, measured. But there was an undercurrent of steel. "Do you often treat customers this way?" Candice swallowed, her mouth dry. You were just what?" Jason asked, stepping closer. Every movement was deliberate, like a predator closing in on prey. "You were just showing your true colors. That's what I see." Selina's heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from the power of the moment. She had endured humiliation, systemic cruelty, and blatant racism, and now the scales were shifting. The air seemed to thicken around Candice. Patrons who had once laughed nervously were now frozen, unsure if they should intervene or flee. But Selina wasn't done. "You wanted to make me feel small," she said, her voice rising with controlled intensity. "To show that your hatred mattered more than my life, more than my dignity. But you were wrong. You chose the wrong person to humiliate." Candice's jaw tightened. Her smile had disappeared completely. She took a step back, suddenly aware that she had overstepped in ways she could not undo. Jason placed a hand gently, but firmly, on Selina's shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked, but the question wasn't for the room. It was for her, and Selina nodded, letting the warmth of his support reinforce the resolve she had fought to build over the past tense minutes. Then the moment of truth came. Selina straightened fully, taking a deep breath. Her voice carried through the café, calm yet sharp enough to cut through any remaining tension. "I am not your target. I am not your lesson. And you will not teach me how to feel small. Not today. Not ever." Candice flinched, a flicker of fear passing across her face. The café seemed to hold its breath. Every eye was on them. And in that moment, Selina realized something. The humiliation that had once felt crushing had transformed into power. She could face prejudice head-on. She could reclaim her space in a world that constantly tried to diminish her. Jason, standing beside her, exuded quiet authority. "I suggest you reconsider how you treat people," he said, his tone leaving no room for misinterpretation. "Especially when those people have the ability to change your world in a single phone call." Candice's smirk was gone. Her arrogance, her careless cruelty had been stripped bare. She stumbled over an apology that sounded hollow, even as it left her lips. But Selina didn't need it. She didn't need to see her humiliation mirrored in Candice's regret. She had already taken back her dignity piece by piece, word by word. For a moment, the café felt suspended in time. Patrons exhaled collectively, some whispering about what had just happened, others stealing glances at the wet dress, the pregnant woman who had stood up for herself, and the man beside her whose presence alone demanded respect. Selina and Jason walked toward the exit together. Every step was deliberate, a statement that the humiliation, the injustice, and the fear had ended, not because someone else enforced it, but because she refused to allow it to control her. As they reached the door, Candice's voice cracked. I didn't mean..." Selina paused, looking back over her shoulder. Her eyes were calm but resolute. "Meaning doesn't erase actions," she said softly. Then, with her chin held high, she stepped out into the sunlight, leaving the café behind, leaving humiliation, judgment and hatred behind as well. Outside, the city hummed with indifference, but Selina felt a storm of strength inside her. She had faced prejudice, stood tall, and reclaimed her dignity. And though the world was still imperfect, she now knew the truth. No one could ever diminish her worth, not a careless waitress, not a stranger, not anyone. But even as she breathed in the crisp air, a thought lingered like a shadow. This wasn't over. People like Candice didn't simply learn lessons without consequences. And the next time she crossed the line, Selina and Jason would be ready, because humiliation may strike without warning. But courage and justice never hesitates. The café was empty now, except for a few lingering patrons who had stayed behind to process what had just occurred. Candice had retreated to the back, her usual arrogance replaced by confusion, fear, and a dawning awareness of the gravity of her actions. Outside, the world moved on with its usual rhythm, unaware of the quiet storm that had just passed inside those walls. Selina and Jason walked away together, the sunlight spilling across the street and warming Selina's soaked dress. Her hand rested on her belly, steadying herself not out of fear, but out of a newfound sense of control. Each step she took felt lighter than the one before, as if she were shedding the weight of humiliation and reclaiming every fragment of dignity that had been threatened earlier. "Are you okay?" Jason asked again, his voice soft now, a stark contrast to the calm authority he had wielded inside the café. Selina took a deep breath. "I am," she said. "I'm more than okay. I feel stronger." Strength, she realized, wasn't just about standing tall in public or retaliating against someone who had wronged her. It was about reclaiming her narrative. It was about refusing to let hate define her or her child before they had even entered the world. As they reached their car, Jason glanced at her with pride. "You handled that perfectly. Calm, collected, and fearless. Not everyone could have done what you did." Selina smiled faintly, thinking back to the first moments of humiliation, the water, the sneers, the whispers. Those moments had felt like the world was closing in on her, reminding her of every prejudice she had ever faced. Yet now, standing beside Jason, she realized those moments had been transformed into a proving ground. Not a place of defeat, but a stage for courage. Back at home, the atmosphere was quieter than usual. The city hummed outside, a backdrop of noise that seemed trivial compared to the intensity of the cafe encounter. Selina removed her wet dress, changed into something comfortable and sat by the window, watching the world move along. Jason joined her, placing a hand over hers. Their connection had grown deeper, forged in the crucible of adversity. "It's more than just Candice," Selina said thoughtfully. "It's the way people see each other, how easily prejudice can shape behavior, even in small everyday interactions. It's systemic, subtle, but the effects are real. And the worst part is, most people don't even realize they're part of it." Jason nodded. "That's why it matters what we do in these moments. Courage isn't just facing one person, it's about setting a precedent. Showing the world that hate has consequences, that dignity cannot be stolen without a fight, and that unity and support make us stronger." Selina leaned back, reflecting on the incident. Candice's humiliation wasn't her only victory. It was a lesson for everyone who had watched. People in the cafe had seen the dynamics of prejudice and power laid bare. And while not everyone would act with immediate courage, they had witnessed a demonstration of dignity and strength. They had seen the price of arrogance and ignorance, and they had seen the power of standing up against hate. In the days that followed, the consequences for Candice became evident. The cafe management, after hearing multiple accounts of the incident, reprimanded her and required her to attend sensitivity and professionalism training. Word spread quickly among the staff and regular patrons. Her behavior had crossed the line, and there would be repercussions. While no single punishment could erase the humiliation she caused, the accountability brought a sense of justice to the community. Meanwhile, Selina found herself reflecting on the broader meaning of the experience. Racism and prejudice were not isolated incidents. They were threads woven into the fabric of society, often invisible, but always powerful. And yet she realized, these threads could be unraveled when people chose courage over silence, unity over division, and love over hate. Jason and Selina also began thinking about the impact of their response beyond the cafe. They discussed how they could support other pregnant women, people of color, and anyone facing everyday discrimination. They considered community initiatives, educational outreach, and sharing their story to inspire others. What had started as a personal act of courage had the potential to ripple outward, encouraging awareness, empathy, and change. At home, Selina's family grew closer. The incident had reminded them of the fragility of safety, the importance of vigilance, and the power of solidarity. They shared quiet moments of reflection, preparing for the arrival of their child, with the knowledge that they were not just bringing a new life into the world. They were bringing a legacy of resilience, dignity, and courage. Selina also recognized an important personal lesson. Her worth was never defined by the opinions or actions of others. Candice's cruelty could not diminish her identity, her strength, or her value as a mother, a wife, or a human being. In fact, the incident had only clarified what was essential: courage, dignity, and unity were the forces that shaped real power, far more than arrogance or prejudice ever could. The moral of her experience became crystal clear. Racism destroys families, poisons communities, and spreads fear and resentment. Prejudice weakens social bonds, erodes empathy, and creates divisions where there should be understanding. But courage, dignity, and unity are far stronger. They heal, they protect, and they inspire. Standing up against hate, whether in a crowded cafe or in the larger society, is not just an act of self-preservation. It is an act of justice. Selina and Jason's story, while deeply personal, became a reflection of a universal truth. When people confront injustice with calm courage and unwavering dignity, they disrupt the cycle of hate. They show that unity strengthens communities, and that standing together, even quietly, sends a powerful message. As the sun set over the city, Selina placed a hand on her belly, feeling the steady heartbeat of the life growing within her. The world was imperfect, yes, and prejudice would always exist in some form. but she felt ready, stronger, resilient. And she knew that when her child came into this world, they would inherit not fear, but courage. Not humiliation, but dignity. Not hatred, but love. And in that moment, the lesson was clear. Hate can strike suddenly, and injustice can feel overwhelming, but the human spirit, fortified by courage, compassion, and unity, is stronger than any act of cruelty. Racism may attempt to humiliate, to divide, to weaken, but it can never triumph over dignity, strength, and the unwavering will to protect oneself and others. Selina and Jason had faced hate head-on, and they had emerged not just unbroken, but empowered. The ripple of their courage would extend far beyond the walls of that cafe, into the lives of anyone willing to listen, to learn, and to stand. And that ultimately is how one act of defiance against injustice becomes a story that inspires generations. Because courage does not merely fight back, it transforms, uplifts, and reminds the world that dignity and unity are forces no prejudice can ever overcome.